one of the best pieces of advice I got from a professor was he told me, write as if the movie already exists, as if the film has already been made and you're watching it and you're just describing it. And I'm like, that is so genius, because it's like,
Interesting. I must have been
we were the same.
not
we were
paying
that close.
attention because I don't remember that
And that's all of us. But
Wow, what great advice.
you don't remember that?
No.
Okay.
Welcome to the Best Boys podcast. I'm Cody McLeod Rogers, writer, director, and producer.
And I'm Tristan, director of photography and producer.
And together we are the creative directors at Foreground Productions. This podcast is where we pull back the curtain on what it's like to be independent filmmakers as we embark on the journey ourselves.
This is Practically Speaking, our series where we give real-life advice on getting started in the film industry based on our own experiences. If you like what you hear on the podcast, feel free to like and subscribe for more.
Welcome to the Best Boys podcast, episode 6, on this beautiful, almost fall day.
Almost.
Not quite. I'm wearing orange.
Yeah.
Well, the Bears play on Sunday.
You're trying to manifest the fall energy.
The fall energy. Yeah. Huge fall guy. huge the Bears guy. Chicago. Mm-hmm. The Bears.
I saw that they won.
They did win.
Recently.
They did win. It was a little bit hairy.
Okay.
I think my dad made it through without a heart attack, so that's good.
That is good.
Yeah.
That's good. It's always good when people do that.
Generally speaking. But speaking of heart attacks, I almost had one earlier this week.
Uh-huh.
I went and saw Hans Zimmer.
Yes, that was
live,
so amazing.
Which was unbelievable. It was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, to see one thing.
Wait, I have a question. What does he do?
For Hans?
Yeah, like
Hansi
what does he
boy?
actually? No, like what does he actually do? Like,
aside from his stand-up comedy between sets. No, well, although he is really funny. So he takes he travels, gosh, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 musicians, and like singers and just people, performers with him, and he goes through a lot of his most famous film scores live.
Right.
And if you know Hans, a lot of his music is very rock on. But he like rockifies it even more. If you know like Trans-Siberian Orchestra, it's similar to that.
I don't, but
you should look at a band called Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Okay.
What's that Christmas song that they do?
Well, they do. Their whole thing is like rock Christmas music.
Yeah.
Like,
have I?
Yeah, you definitely have. Like,
your mic isn't on.
No, I know. I'm just telling you.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just letting you know.
Producer Shelby is saying.
Okay.
You are incorrect.
Okay.
And you do know.
I do know. Apparently, I saw it.
Yes.
Yes, I do actually know.
But yeah, no. So he plays a lot of his most famous film scores. You know, he did. He opened with Dune.
Yeah.
Of course.
Wait, which one from Dune? Can you do it?
Dune 2. It was the bagpipe one. I can't do.
Okay. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, it was the bagpipe. Well, it really started with I forgot her name, but the vocalist in Dune. That one. Yeah. It started not with that song, but her walking across the stage doing that.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then that song is what opened up the second half. It was Dune, it was Gladiator, it was The Last Samurai, of course, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. That sounds amazing. Hans Zimmer sounds amazing.
And getting to hear The Lion King the day, I saw it the day James Earl Jones passed away. So it was very emotional, the Lion King medley and tribute to him. But anyway, enough about our boy Hans.
That was cool.
Of the Zimmer variety. Highly recommend anyone. If he's coming around you should definitely go see it.
You should love the music.
But speaking of Hans, as a film composer, he works with filmmakers.
Yes.
And filmmakers oftentimes write stories.
They do. That is it's funny. Screenwriting, which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
The basics sort of screenwriting in our sort of sense is, I think, it is the genesis of every creative thing that you do as a filmmaker. You have to start with the bones of a strong story in the pages, you know. That's why I'm really excited to talk about it today, because I think two of us also have different ideas of like of our processes and how we write. Well,
it's also interesting because, you know, we're approaching this whole idea of screenwriting we are not, let's be very clear, we are not authorities on screenwriting. We have done our short films and, believe in a lot of projects we've worked on. But as we're talking about screenwriting today, overall, we're talking about it from a perspective of just what we find interesting.
Yeah.
And so if you're listening to this, we haven't won Oscars. We haven't won, I almost said Grammys, which is completely irrelevant.
I've won for a short film.
Yes.
But not in writing, but just for it being good.
Yes.
which is part of it being
yes,
well written,
which is part of the story being well. But so as you listen, know that we are talking about that these thoughts and these opinions really come from a place of what we personally really find interesting.
Yeah.
And we're gonna kind of analytically break down why we think that and what we find interesting about screenwriting.
Yeah.
So Tristan, what is your process like for writing? And I mean, set the mood for me. I want to bring me into your space.
So I don't write that often anymore because I mostly DP, produce, do more of the production stuff. But when I was writing a lot, specifically when I was in college, in screenwriting classes, I knew like I needed to get words on a page, so I always just try to write. And I'm someone who works in really big chunks of time, very very sporadically.
Yeah.
So like I'll write maybe like only 2 or 3 times a week, but I'll be writing for like maybe 4 hours.
Wow.
Like 3 or 4 hours, or rewriting, or just rereading.
So you really zone in.
I really try to stay. Yeah, I really try to like get really focused and ingrained. I like to do a lot of rereading. I like to read out my lines, like even though I'm not an actor, it's kind of hard to read out the lines in like out loud, but it's actually a really good practice, I think, reading your lines out loud.
And you're great at accents, by the
way. I try my best. Yeah, so I write in big chunks of time because I tend to really hone in and focus on a story in one specific moment. And I feel like as a writer, I gain momentum by how much time I spend focusing and thinking about a story. And I usually don't let the writer's block or like the inability to like keep writing stop me. I just try to push through that.
Yeah.
So usually that ends up with like really messy or sort of incoherent words on a page, but at least I have my ideas on the page and I can rewrite that and reread that later.
And where do you get those ideas?
So like so it's the classic thing that any screenwriting professor or screenwriting class will tell you when thinking about like coming up with ideas is write what you know. Everybody says write what you know. And it's true. In my opinion, especially when you're first starting out as a screenwriter, taking inspiration from your life or your experience or the things that you want to write about and know about is the strongest way to create a compelling story. The reason, I think, is because it is when you draw from something so close to you, so that has an emotional connection to you, you're able to speak about it with more authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't talk about I wouldn't necessarily start writing about a story that I wouldn't know about unless I conducted my research. And if you don't have time, or if you're not willing, or you don't have the resources to conduct that research, you might as well take the research that you have, which is your life, right?
Yep.
Your experiences. So that's kind of where a lot of the stories that I think about, or the stories I'm most proud of, come from. And that doesn't necessarily mean writing. That bird is so loud.
It's pretty.
It doesn't necessarily mean writing specific verbatim, this stuff happened to me. Because sometimes that could feel a bit like...
Well, that's starting to get into a whole lot of trauma, potentially. And,
I don't... There's something great about being autobiographical in screenwriting and stuff like that. But I think there's also the creative element, right? It's also you're trying to, this is a story, this is something that you can manipulate and change. Something that I like to draw from is not just like experiences, but emotions or feelings, like personal, like feelings that you felt in your upbringing, things that you experienced that may feel like intangible.
Yeah.
And injecting that into a different story or a different setting, you know, and that is a way that you can sort of insert yourself in a story without having to make it about you or make it about something you experienced. For example, Omakase is...
Great film. It's a great film, by the
way. Omakase was written because I felt like I wanted to tell a story about intergenerational divide and communication and breakdown. Now, that's not to say that like that's something that I experience like on a daily basis, but there are moments where I have like where I experience with my own parents like, oh, we're like saying like kind of the same thing, but we're like talking past each other, or you know, sometimes I don't exactly know how to communicate with this person, even though they are like the closest person to me, and that's sort of due to like cultural divide.
Yeah.
You know, and so while Omakase was, you know, set in a Japanese American setting and specifically an American setting, it still sort of spoke to the experiences or the feelings that I had growing up. You know, so that's kind of an example of what I was just saying, like taking that sort of that feeling or emotion in your life and translating it into a story, still making that story something about whatever you want, you know?
Yeah.
But still having that personal touch to it.
Yeah.
What about you? I'm interested in how do you come up with stories, log lines, premises?
So I've written a lot of things. I write a lot, like a lot, and so many things that I write are just not, they live in totally different universes. Like one day I will write something that is very grounded and really down to earth and everything is so subtle and it's gritty. And then the next day I write about a mustache boy fighting in World War II and it's completely comedic and completely ridiculous. And for me, I mean, writing is obviously, you know, very therapeutic for a lot of reasons, but oftentimes I just write to what I'm most fascinated in. So, you know, you were saying write what you know. And I guess I know really what I'm most curious about. And I want to explore that. And within that curiosity of adventure or weird circumstances or situations to I'm writing to is where I really start to put in my emotion of the experiences I have had throughout my life. What I do, and Tristan, I don't know if I've ever actually told you this, is I keep a note in the notes app thing on the iPhone.
Yes.
Made by Apple, the Apple iPhone.
Yes, the Apple iPhone Notes.
Yes,
app.
The Notes app in the Apple iPhone.
Yes.
But I keep track of random things I find really beautiful in the world. And they're completely random. I have it on me at all times, obviously because of cellular devices in this day and age. But if I see something really beautiful, I write it down.
Yeah.
And then when I get in the space where I want to write, which is a whole, honestly, it's kind of like a ritual for me. I revisit those notes, and oftentimes a lot of inspiration stems from that. But another place I start from is whenever I write, I always try to write for some part of me in the story to who I wish I was.
Interesting.
And, you know, you're not going to find one of my characters and be like, that's who Cody wishes he was. But it's going to be like subtle elements, or even if it's just a scene of something that happened in my life, but I write it maybe to how I wish I would have acted in that situation. And that's where a lot of my ideas come from. And the inspiration, I have a strong love for adventure. And a lot of what I write deals with adventure to some degree or lack of adventure. And wanting to go somewhere and wanting to have those experiences. And we can get into the therapy of it all and the philosophy as to why I'm driven to those types of stories. But yeah, I mean, inspiration is all around you.
And it is therapeutic.
It's so therapeutic.
Yeah.
But even to a further extent, what I think about every day is everything around us has a story. Absolutely everything, right? This beautiful lamp was made by somebody, right? And that person who made that lamp, what is their life like? Do they go into work every day to make that? Why do they make it? Do they have kids? Behind everything, there's a story. And if you walk down the street and you think about, oh, that tree, maybe somebody planted that tree. Did they plant trees because they've had a 75 plus year family tree planting business? Why did they start planting trees in the first place? If you have that inquisitive nature of everything around you and understand that everything has a story, there's inspiration everywhere. You just have to look, and you have to investigate it, and you have to be curious.
I find myself really motivated to write after watching good movies. Personally, like watching different movies too, different types of movies, or watching a movie that I maybe would have not picked up on or decided to watch unless I really search for something weird or interesting or different. And I find those are really big inspirations for me. But I also do the same kind of thing that you do, Cody, which is when because we're all filmmakers, we all think about story all the time. I have a page in my notes app with similar things where I have premises I've written down. One time I was on a plane and I couldn't fall asleep because it was a long flight. It was maybe 10 hours. And I couldn't fall asleep. So I decided to think about a story idea that I had before and started expanding on it. And did I tell you the story?
Yeah. We talked about it.
So I spent the next 2 or 3 hours just I fleshed out the log line, and then I did a scene by scene breakdown of this entire short film. And so I have this entire short film outlined in my notes app, and I haven't touched it since that flight, and I haven't even read it back. But sometimes it's so funny, the moments of inspiration come to you in the most random moments. And luckily I'm able to jot it down or so I don't forget. I'm always so worried, oh my god, I'm gonna think of this story in this moment and I gotta write it down, otherwise I'm gonna forget about it.
Absolutely.
Which is why it's nice to have your notes app on your phone to just quickly write that
down. On iPhones made by Apple.
So Cody, I know that writing or even thinking about different story ideas can be really difficult, even coming up with a story.
It's exhausting.
Do you have any tips or techniques let's say I'm a writer, but I'm struggling to come up with something. What would you is there something I could do?
I think so. The first two things. The first thing is, again, going back to that curiosity. Really investigate, what do you find interesting? And it can be anything, right? It can be history, it can be literature, it can be sports, it can be human relationships, it can be crocheting, just whatever it is. Start with something you find interesting.
Yeah.
And from there, one really fun technique that we had a professor do for both of us back in film school, a very well-traveled individual would be a good way to paint this particular professor. But he had us for every day. We had to come in
every day, every week.
Every week.
Oh my god, not every day.
We had to come in with, what was it, 3?
It was 2. I think.
2.
Yeah.
2 log lines.
Yeah.
And then you explain a little bit more.
And descriptions.
Yeah, and description. 2 log lines and a description every week.
Yep.
And by the end of the semester, it starts to get really, really, really hard because you're like, golly gee, I have done this for 14 straight weeks. I have had to have come up with every possible story to exist. And you can't think of anything else. But what it forces you to do is to make something.
Yes.
And make something authentic to you, right?
Exactly.
And it's really hard to do, but man, there's so many great ideas came out of that.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if that's true for you, that's true. It was true for me as well. I think it's funny. I never asked you if like you actually created like good log lines from that from that exercise. But for me, what it did was, I remember for the first couple of weeks, I was like, oh, I got this. You know, I'm creative. I can come up with a story just like that. And then after the fourth week, I was like, oh my god, I can't come up with anything. I'm like, who am I? Am I even a filmmaker? And then so
Even an artist, man.
I know, right? I was like, it can't be this hard. So that's, like you said, it really forced me to push myself into what made me curious, or parts about me or about my history. So I looked back at like maybe I looked back at things that happened, like historical things that happened in like my home country, and that created a really exciting logline that I would love to make someday. It's like a spy espionage thriller set in Malaysia. Based on like a true story. I was like, I love Wikipedia. I go on like Wikipedia rabbit holes all the time. So like that was very helpful.
I did the same exact thing because I started struggling, I don't know, maybe a few weeks in with trying to come up with ideas. And so what I started doing is really analyzing my hometown and its history and its dynamics. And I kid you not, I think from that alone, I produced probably 10 different log lines. And every single one of them was based on my hometown. And the professor every time was just like, no way, this isn't real. This didn't happen. But it doing that exercise forces you to take something maybe perhaps that you know so well. I mean, you know, I grew up in this place for the better part of 18 years, and I never really thought of it in a story way.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, out of this thing that you get to know every day of your life for years on end, for decades on end, all of a sudden starts to become really, really interesting when you start framing it with the idea of making a film, making a script. How do I make my monotonous hometown interesting? It's a challenge, but the answer is always there.
Right.
You know.
So we talked about like, you know, creating log lines for this exercise, and just in general, it's just such a great exercise in creative storytelling. What in your mind makes a good log line? Because a lot of times when I read log lines and different pitches and stuff like that, they aren't actually log lines. They're more like premises.
Yeah.
And so what I want to ask you, what differentiates a log line from a premise?
So log lines are so hard to write. I mean, imagine taking a 3-hour film like Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, or something like that, that is so complex, and turning it into one, at most, 2 sentences.
Yeah.
It's super hard to do, but at least to me, and again, this is this is just my perspective as to what I find interesting in a log line and what I'm gravitate towards. If the log line, it needs to have something unique in it, right? And that could mean a million different things. It could be a character trait, it could be a situation, it could be, well, I guess really those would be two of the big things it would be, but there needs to be something where I read that log line and it's like, well, this isn't like anything else.
Yeah.
And that I think is a great starting point, you know, for log line.
Absolutely. I think the two you touched on, what I think are the two really main components of a log line is a character and an action. You know,
Yeah.
I think that the best log lines have compelling character with compelling action.
Yeah.
Something that I like to read and reread and think about when I read a log line or write a log line is this active? Is this are there verbs? Is that what they are? Action words, verbs, right?
Verbs. Yes, yeah. That is. Good job.
Thank you. You know, I barely passed. You know, 5th grade. Do you learn verbs in 5th grade? I don't know.
Probably, you know, 10
around
years.
there.
It's elementary.
Elementary. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know that's what I look for is if I see a log line that has like the word is or are, I'd be like, okay, I'm checked out. I want to feel the immediacy of the story in that one I believe that log lines should be one sentence, and I think that you can always make a log line one sentence. If you have to use a second sentence, again, I'm checked out. It's sort of like a pitch, and we talked about like the pitch back in like episode
one or two, I think.
Like, it's got to be like that. Your reader has to know the story from that one line.
So we're doing a lot of talking about log lines, so I figured we'd read a couple that we find to be really effective.
That'd be great.
And here's one.
Like our own or?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No,
I can pull up some of my own.
But here's one from a great film, Eternal. Oh, no. Okay, we're going to do that. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to read the log lines.
And people guess.
And you're going to try and guess.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This is a new bit.
Oh, yeah, this will be fun. Yeah,
new bit alert. Beep, beep, beep. That's a new bit sound. Beep, beep.
Are you on like, did you search up like famous?
Well, I'm on Reddit, please.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this is the first one.
Okay.
I think it's brilliant. It's one of my all-time favorites. When their relationship turns sour, a couple undergoes a medical procedure to have each other erased from their memories.
That one's pretty easy. That's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yes. But, if we're breaking it down, it's so great because think about having your memories of a loving relationship erased.
Yeah.
And what leads to that point, right? So It really grabs you.
Let me find one for you to do real quick.
Yes.
This is a fun bit. I actually like this. Okay. This is for...
Don't. Yeah.
No, I know.
Just read it first.
Okay.
I'm locked in.
A rat who can cook makes an unusual alliance with a young kitchen worker at a famous Paris restaurant.
Is it Cars?
Yeah, it is Cars, actually.
Obviously, it's Ratatouille.
Yeah, but if you want to, we can break it down real quick. Like a rat who can cook.
Rats are famous for stealing food. It grabs you.
Yes,
you're in.
That is compelling. That is
right?
compelling.
Nasty.
They are also
rats are famous for being nasty, and one could argue the antithesis of a nice cuisine.
Right, exactly. And then to break it down even further, makes an unusual alliance. That's sort of your verb, your action. I wouldn't say that's like the strongest way to word it, but it's still action, And again, these are just like things we like search up on. Like they're not the actual log line. I don't know if they're actual.
Yeah, I got mine from Reddit. You may be familiar with the website.
But exactly. So, that's kind of what the two of us are kind of talking about is like how to make that. That's kind of what the two of us are like talking about is how to make that log line compelling from the get-go. That I think that a compelling log line elevates your story and your pitch so much. The first one, that's going to be one of the first things anyone who is like specking out your project, who is you're interested in hiring, stuff like that. That's one of the first things they're going to read.
It's logline first.
They're not going to read the script first. They're going to read the logline first.
Yeah.
And if that logline doesn't draw them in, they're not going to be interested in your story.
No.
So it is. That's why the exercise that we were talking about is important. That's why thinking about writing it is important, and practicing it is important because it is a really important skill. So I talked a bit about my process. It's a very sort of honed in, focused process. And time consuming. What about you? What's your writing process?
For me, I really like to be isolated.
Okay.
I like to be in a very observant and omniscient state of mind and state of being, which sounds like, super meta, but it's true. And frequently what I will do, if I know I'm going to be doing a lot of writing that day, whether it's in the morning or the evening, I usually start it off with a walk. Like mine is very... it is kind of like a ritual, what I do for writing. So I start off with a walk and I will listen to whatever, oftentimes, not always, film scores that are adjacent to what I want to be writing. Mm-hmm. As some of you may or may not know, I'm also a composer. And so I do lots of music writing. And so I think of story through a musical lens in addition to a literal screenwriting lens. So a lot of times I will listen to scores doing that. But then also, if I want to be hearing, eavesdropping in on people and listening to conversations and that kind of stuff, I won't be listening to music, but I will walk around and I will let my mind freely wander. Let it completely go. Whatever is instinctively interesting, that's what I gravitate towards. And if I've already had a story begin, I have a loose framework of knowing that I'm looking for inspiration to continue writing. So I know kind of the world and the story I'm generally working in, but within that space, I let my mind wander. After I go on a walk, I usually come back and I always light a candle or two, good smelling ones, ideally not the bad smelling ones. And I will sit down, typically with dimly lit, in a dimly lit room. If it's the weekend, maybe I have a glass of wine,
Yeah.
But to me, that is the process. And I really try to embody the characters I'm writing about and think about, completely remove my own view of the world from the story. I know we talked about writing what you know, but in this case, if I'm really trying to write a character, I will think of everything that the character will do. Matter of fact, some of the times on these walks, I will try and almost become this character. I also have a background in acting, which is kind of why I do this, but I will walk the way I think my character would walk. I would think about things the way I think the character I'm writing would think about. I pass a blue car. Would my character buy that blue car? And these are all things I'm thinking about while I'm on this walk. And then when I get back into the space with the candles, maybe a glass of wine, and it's dark and it's just me alone in my room or nature or wherever I am writing, I have been fully consumed by the story I am about to write. That's like really meta. It's almost like method acting writing.
Yeah. Method writing.
Yeah, method writing. But that's kind of, with that being said, if I'm writing something a little bit hairy, perhaps precarious or illegal, I do not do those things. Let me be clear. But still, that's my process. It's every time, that is my process. It's been like that for years at this point.
That is, I think there's some things to be said about the importance of ritual, especially in filmmaking in general.
And cults too.
It's and cults, and it is kind of no, I'm joking. There is something to be said about like ritual in writing, because it I think it helps put you in that mind space, like the mindset of like and like the best possible like space for you to create and think, because it can be really discouraging to sit down being like, I want to write something right now, and just nothing is happening, and you're just trying to put stuff on the page, and you're afraid like, oh, this isn't it, like I'm just not gonna write it. I'd say still write it, and always get words on a page,
always,
because you can always go back and reread.
Revising is always easier than getting it down for the first time. Every time.
Absolutely. I would say that most of screenwriting is rewriting. I think that's something that one of our professors has told us a lot. One of our screenwriting professors is like, most of the time you are rewriting, you are rereading, you are changing. Because with screenwriting, with story, every change you make affects the story in whatever place it is, in the first act, in the third act, whatever, right? If you change something in the third act, you have to go back and read all the way back to act one and make sure that everything lines up,
Well, that's because, in screenwriting, in filmmaking in general, just broadly, but absolutely everything is intentional, because you are creating an entire universe, an entire world from completely nothing, but just your own brain. Everything is intentional.
Yes.
And
consequential.
Yes. Everything. It doesn't matter if it is a stool in the background of the shot. Like, you may not, if you're screenwriting, you're probably not writing, there is a dark brown stool in the back of the shot, right? But that stool placement tells you stuff about the character, and it tells you stuff about the story. And so as you're writing the story, everything is consequential, because everything is purposeful because screenwriting doesn't exist outside of your own head.
Yes, exactly. And I'd say one of the last things I have about screenwriting in general before we wrap this up is because you're the writer, you are still writing towards a visual medium.
Mm-hmm.
So you've always got to be thinking about, what am I seeing? What am I showing? I'm sure we're gonna make a future episode really going into like the mechanics of screenwriting. Maybe we'll pull up like an example script and stuff like that. But for now, I encourage you to just think about what visually is happening. One of the best pieces of advice I got from a professor was, he told me, write as if the movie already exists, as if the film has already been made and you're watching it and you're just describing it. And I'm like, that is so genius, because it's like,
interesting. I must have been
we were the same,
not paying attention because I don't remember that at
that's all of us. But
wow, what great advice.
You don't remember that?
No.
Okay.
Oh,
well,
beautiful.
Because, and I'm like, that's so genius, because it's like, usually hopefully that's how you work most of the time, is like you can imagine and visualize the film in your head, but it's just a good exercise to like, just like feel more, to like really visualize the story, and then you're just simply describing it on the page.
Yeah.
And I think by doing that, you make the screenplay more vivid, more compelling, more focused. Again, like you said, everything is intentional, everything is purposeful. Every word, every description, every scene description, every prop that you insert has to be there for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be the person that, okay, interior bedroom, and then you describe everything about the bedroom, and you spend an entire page of scene descriptions just describing a bedroom. You have to pick and choose what is important. If everything's important, everything's important.
Yeah.
But most likely, not everything is important. You got to choose what is important to include and what your audience is reading, because that's what they're going to be seeing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the last part of kind of this episode is dealing with feedback.
Yeah.
And the complete gut-wrenching, uncomfortable, annoying nature of getting feedback on your screenplay.
Yes.
So Tristan.
Why do you bring it to me? Why are you not gonna... No, ask away. No, I'm the king of feedback.
Tristan is phenomenal at giving feedback because he is absolutely ruthless. And he is brutal. We have, I have shared ideas with him that I think are great. And I'm like, this is so good. And then, we've been very, very close friends for several years at this point. And Tristan responds back with, yeah, none of these are working. But he explains why.
Yeah.
And that's really great. And I guess my point of bringing that up is, you can't be going out and getting feedback from everybody. You just can't do that. There's either going to be people that tell you, yes, this is great, or there's going to be people that tell you, no, this is awful, or there's going to be people in the middle where they're like, it's fine, and no offense to them, that's completely useless.
It's fine is very useless. Yes. It's fine.
Doesn't mean anything at all.
Or like, oh, it's okay. No. Tell me if it's good or bad.
Sure, it's great to have people read it and be like, yes, this is good, but I'm sorry, don't send it to your mom right away. And I know my mom is going to listen to this. I love her dearly. But like, I'm not going to send her my script because I know that script in my first draft. I will eventually, but I know that she's going to love it. Right. However, if you surround yourself by people who you trust because you genuinely think they're very creatively talented and that produce things that you aspire to be yourself, if you surround yourself with those kinds of people, and those are the people you seek feedback from, they're going to be very honest with you. And that is what is most valuable.
Absolutely. You want honest feedback. You want people that you can turn to that will tell you their thoughts based on the story, and only the story. Yeah. You want to know where your story fails and where it succeeds.
Mm-hmm.
so that you don't have to rewrite everything.
Yeah.
So you've realized, okay, these are the things that are working that I can keep, and these are the things that aren't working that I can tweak, and try to find that happy medium together. I love receiving feedback and giving feedback because on different scripts, because I love reading about different stories. I love I love storytelling and all that. And I love trying to help people make better stories.
Yeah.
A lot of projects that I do now, I'm actually really involved with the screenwriting, like with the process. It's not something that a DP usually is involved in. Maybe if you were a producer, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the last 2 projects I've been doing, independent narrative projects I've been doing, I have been really involved in the writing process for one of the projects, which we're about to shoot in October. I've been very involved in the screenwriting process and the revision process, reading every draft, giving notes. And a lot of these notes have been implemented. Some of them haven't been, but some have. And now we're at the stage where like I'm really proud of the story, and I gotta have a say. And that was really, I feel really humbled that the director wants my feedback.
Yeah.
I think similarly in the other direction, you have to be humble about your own work
mm-hmm.
and about receiving feedback.
Yeah.
Don't take it to heart, the things that aren't working.
Which is really hard to do because it's very personal.
It is. Yeah. Like, take it, don't think about yourself, think about the story. The story is its own entity, Like if something's not working about the story, that is something that you can change. That's something that can always be changed. I think it's about like, and it's not feeling like the personal, like, oh, this person doesn't like my story. That means they don't like me or they think I'm bad. It's like, no, that's not what's going on. It's just that these are elements that could be reworked.
Yeah.
And they're always reworkable. Nothing is set in stone.
That's the beautiful thing about writing is if you're the person writing, you control everything. There's absolutely nothing that cannot be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. That means you can always make something beautiful and great, and you can always make it better. As you're getting feedback, if you're getting a lot of feedback from somebody specifically, and they just have pages and pages and pages of notes, that means that they probably think you're capable of making something really great, and more so, it means they care enough about you and your work to take time out of their very busy schedule to really dive in and make your story better.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are lucky enough to find somebody who is willing to do that, do not take that for granted because it's super rare. And that is how you will become a better writer.
I would say, if you aren't in film school or if you're, an independent screenwriter, you just want to, start making stuff, look for writers groups, like writer circles. Chances are there will be something in your area of like screenwriters coming together weekly or bi-weekly and workshopping together, which is exactly what we do, in film school. Again, it's so valuable to get a different opinion, like just an outside opinion sometimes, like from somebody that may not even know who you are, because they are probably going to find different things about your story that you never even saw. So, yeah.
And so we're in a future episode, we're going to break down the mechanics of screenwriting, like the literal technical aspects of screenwriting, both for fiction, like in Final Draft or something like that, but then also documentary. We're going to break down how to write technically documentaries again. And so with that being said, have just a splendid evening.
Yes.
Just a great day.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a little different, talking about screenwriting, but it's a subject I think the two of us love or so invested in. So I love talking about this. I could talk about writing forever.
And that's the Best Boys podcast.
We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.